Many California state leaders, housing advocates, homeless advocates say there's a housing crisis, and possibly for good reason. California is one of the most expensive places to live. And the reality is there's just not enough affordable housing for many residents who struggle to pay the bills and the rent. So now cities in the Golden State are being asked to do more where housing is concerned. Cities like Huntington Beach and Orange County, for example. In fact, Huntington Beach is being ordered to build thousands of affordable housing units despite opposition from city leaders and many of the residents who live in this iconic beach city, Surf City, USA. And the state of California is now suing Huntington Beach for not complying with a state mandate to build there. Should the city of Huntington Beach take personal responsibility and build these housing developments so lower income folks have a better place to live, a better opportunity, more affordable housing? Should Huntington Beach city leaders and their residents, well, should they not be NIMBYs, as they say, and not say not in my backyard? Or is there something more going on here that the state is not telling us? Well, joining me now to discuss all of this is Huntington Beach Mayor Tony Strickland. Since the day Mayor Strickland took office in December of 2022, he's been on a personal campaign of sorts to stop the state housing mandate in his city. Mayor Strickland, a conservative, is not new to politics. He was part of the California State Assembly from 1998 to 2004, and he was a California State Senator from 2008 to 2021. Also joining the panel is Michael Gates. Michael is a city attorney for Huntington Beach. As city attorney, he represents and advises City Council in all legal matters involving HB. Thank you both so much for being here.
Thanks for having us on.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Before we get to our interview, I should tell our audience I invited Governor Gavin Newsom to be part of this panel discussion. I spoke with the governor's office requesting the interview to get his take on all of this. The office, on behalf of the governor, declined to be interviewed, saying this is an active legal matter and they could not participate in this Zoom interview. Well, I should also let our viewers know that even though this is an active legal matter, as the governor's office states, the respective parties involved in any lawsuit, unless the judge specifically orders otherwise, can be interviewed as a matter of context to explain things like the basis of the case, the merit of the lawsuit, why this is a matter for the courts, or answer really any other background questions from a reporter. So after they declined the interview request, I asked for, at the very least, a statement from the governor's office to try and get any info about this case from the governor's perspective. Well, here is that statement from Governor Newsom's office, which reads, in part, quote, "Every community needs to step up and do the right thing for California to be a place anyone can call home. Communities have neglected their responsibility to meet the housing needs of today and the future." The email goes on to say this NIMBYism attitude directly contributes to the increased homelessness we see on our streets. The status quo will no longer be tolerated. Cities from Huntington Beach to San Francisco and in every corner of the state are being held accountable. It's time for the political posturing to stop and for real solutions to be implemented, end quote. The email was from Daniel Lopez, Deputy Communications Director with the Office of Governor Gavin Newsom. I appreciate the statement. Thanks, Daniel Lopez. And as a matter of record, I hope to interview the governor or a rep from his office on a future broadcast as we follow this story. With that being said, unfortunately, minus the governor, let's get to the issues with Huntington Beach Mayor Tony Strickland and Huntington Beach City Attorney Michael Gates. Mayor Strickland, let's begin first with some background about the lawsuit. We're going to talk about the statement from the governor later. Talk about California versus City of Huntington Beach over this housing issue. In other words, how many housing units are we talking? How many buildings is the state basically mandating in your city? Where exactly is this going to be built? Give us sort of a comprehensive overview.
Well, okay, so first and foremost, the governor and the state gave us these arena numbers that are 13,368 high-density units. To put that in perspective, we're 95% built out as a city, and the other 5% are in areas that are environmentally sensitive areas like the wetlands that no one wants to build in. So we're 95% built out. Also, we've done more for affordable housing than almost any other area and city in Orange County already up to this date. This is such a huge number. If you put it in perspective, what it would turn out to be is increasing our population anywhere up to 50 to 100% if we went along with the governor's mandate. This is fundamental for our city. And really what it comes down to is this fundamental philosophy coming out of Sacramento. Even when I served in Sacramento, they have this philosophy that pretty much what they want to do is urbanize California. They don't like suburban communities. There's a reason why California has the highest gas tax in the nation. There's a reason why California has the highest car registration fee in the nation. And when they spend money in transportation, for the most part, they don't spend on roads and highways. They spend on things like the bullet train, because they believe they believe by punishing you for driving a car will then turn into urbanization, and they want to urbanize Huntington Beach. Well, the people in Huntington Beach like the coastal suburban community that it is today. Our predecessors on the council have done a remarkable job at building out this wonderful city. We get millions of visitors every year, and the people who live here like the suburban community feel. And the last thing you want to do is urbanize. And in fact, most of the people will leave this city if we don't win this fundamental fight. I believe less government is better government, but government closest to people is best for the people. I believe as mayor, I know what's best for Huntington Beach, not a bureaucrat in Sacramento, and certainly not Gavin Newsom. I'm not going to allow Gavin Newsom to do to Huntington Beach what he did to San Francisco. As mayor of San Francisco, he left his city in shambles. I am not going to allow Governor Newsom to do the same thing to Huntington Beach.
Mayor, getting back to the governor's statement, he's basically saying, listen, you're not doing your part. You're sort of politicizing all this, political posturing anyway, and you have this NIMBYism attitude, basically not in your backyard. What do you say to his statement?
Well, there's a Jewish term called chutzpah. In fact, I would call him a hypocrite, because at the end of the day, when you look at it, there's no RHNA mandate for his home county of Marin. They don't have any mandate until 2029. They're exempt. He's in the wine business. Napa, for example, has no mandate. Where Oprah Winfrey and his donors live in Montecito, they don't have a mandate. And if you understand that California, 95% of Californians live in 5% of the area space. And there are no incentives from the governor of Sacramento to actually build in that 95%. In fact, San Bernardino wants to develop. They have area to develop. They want to build homes there, and the state is preventing them from doing so. And if we had the housing crisis that the governor was talking about, he would move forward and do whatever he could to mitigate anything to allow those developments to happen in San Bernardino where they want it. And in cities like Huntington Beach, where we're 95% built out, and we've already done a lot in terms of affordable housing, we certainly wouldn't have this number. So what I would say, it's a Jewish term called chutzpah, because at the end of the day, this is another classic example of Governor Newsom wanting to pass on to other people what he's not willing to do to himself in his home county.
Huntington Beach City Attorney Michael Gates, I have to admit I am extremely disappointed that the governor, or at the very least a rep from his office, declined to be interviewed and answer my questions. However, I am going to be fair in my reporting. So to defend the state, isn't this housing mandate, Michael, the law in California? In other words, doesn't your city have to abide and comply with this law?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And there's a whole bunch of answers to it. I'm going to be as succinct as I can. Basically, Huntington Beach is a charter city. And as a charter city, and the community in Huntington Beach came together and adopted our charter. That's two things. Really, it's a document that sets forth our form of government, but it also is a declaration of independence in some respects from the state of California. And that's as it relates specifically to municipal affairs. That is to say, certain areas of governance that charter cities are entitled to without interference from the state. And that's what the California Constitution provides for. For decades, charter cities have been able to make their own zoning determinations, their own land use determinations, until more recently when the state began to set forth more aggressive housing laws that set forth quotas and mandates. And really the state began to try to micromanage zoning and local land use decisions. Well, there's a whole host of issues with that, right? It interferes with our local control, which is set forth by the California Constitution. The California Constitution is our highest law in the state of California. It supersedes even state legislative acts. So that's an issue there. But in addition to that, in 2022, the independent state auditor came out and found, and this is important, that the RHNA determinations by the state agency, HCD, the state's Housing and Community Development Agency, was flawed in its methodology and application of RHNA to cities. So how can a flawed determination like Huntington Beach's 13,368 units be a mandate, or it's not even reliable? An independent state auditor already found it's unreliable. But the problem is, as the mayor, our mayor, Tony Strickland, pointed out, it can't possibly be a matter of statewide concern if the governor, in its own laws, is exempting or giving special treatment to his hometown, Marin County, or his favored cities like Napa or City of Commerce. And there are zero incentives in the state's laws to provide for or incentivize development in undeveloped areas of the state. And what the state laws are doing is they're forcing, believe it or not, forcing other elected officials of other bodies like our city council to vote a certain way and to say certain things to justify the vote, in this case in favor of high density housing. And that's what we're pushing back on, as well as a violation of the city council members' First Amendment rights. They should be free to speak how they want to and vote how they want to on issues that are under their duty, their jurisprudence, or their jurisdiction. And so we're pushing back on that as a First Amendment violation. So there's a whole bunch of layers to this, and so we're gonna keep up the fight and keep pushing back, and not recognize these as legitimate state mandates.
And both of you mentioned, and Michael, I'll get your take on this first. Both of you are saying that, if I'm not mistaken, while Governor Newsom is ordering thousands of these affordable housing units to be built basically in your backyard, are you saying he's not ordering them to be built in, his hood, so to speak, Marin County, Montecito County, there in the Bay Area? It is curious. I did read somewhere, a lot of the critics say it's more than curious. They're saying that the governor's being very hypocritical. However, the governor's not here, so I'm going to, again, be a good reporter and defend the governor's office. Give me the legalese on this, because if I'm also not mistaken, there is, Michael, an exemption to build in those Bay Area counties. Is that correct? What's going on there?
Yeah, basically, certain areas of the state are allowed to skirt the high density RHNA mandates. Other areas of the state have no incentives, even though they have undeveloped territory. So the governor's legislation, these state laws, these RHNA laws, are really imposing heavy burdens on already developed, populated areas of the state. And as the mayor indicated, Huntington Beach is already 95% built out. So what this governor is basically saying is, Huntington Beach, don't look for areas where you can build new housing. They're saying, no, you have to redevelop areas of your city that are already developed. And that too is unconscionable. We're already developed. Why doesn't the governor focus on undeveloped areas? That's a path of least resistance. There are cities that actually want to develop their undeveloped territories. Huntington Beach is not one of them. Huntington Beach, like the mayor said, has already done more in the region for affordable housing, development, and even addressing homelessness than any other city in the region. So when the governor says things like Huntington Beach has been neglectful or needs to do more, I don't think he knows what he's talking about, because Huntington Beach has actually been at the forefront of development, housing development, and even addressing homelessness. I just don't think the governor knows what he's talking about.
One thing I would like to add is what the city attorney Gates talked about in terms of freedom of speech. And I think that it's important for your viewers to understand what that is. And that's why I signed on, not just the city of Huntington Beach, but as an individual in this lawsuit in the federal court. What the governor and they're mandating us to do as elected officials is to go along with what's called a statement of overriding consideration. And so what that really means is the belief that his housing crisis would override any other negative impact that would have on our community. For example, noise pollution, traffic congestion, water shortages, environmental or wetlands damage that would happen here in Huntington Beach, pollution, geology and seismic impacts. We can't say any of those impacts in a negative way in our community. We would have to agree to a statement of overriding consideration that the governor's mandate overrides any of those negative impacts in our city. And quite frankly, I don't believe that. And also, let's look at the state of California. This is the first time since we become a state where we actually lost congressional representation after a 10-year census. A lot of people are leaving because of his tax policies and his overregulation policies just in general as governor. And so people are leaving the state. But at the very end of the day, I do not believe that his housing crisis is more important than any of the negative impacts that might happen from these high density, high rise apartments that they want to put into Huntington Beach.
Mayor Strickland, there are many counties in California, as you mentioned earlier. A couple of examples: San Bernardino County, Riverside County. There's lots of land out there. There's a housing shortage. These counties are basically begging to have affordable housing developments built in their backyards. I've talked with city leaders over the years in the Inland Empire. They've said as much. Just out of curiosity, why isn't this housing being built in those counties?
Because really what it comes down to, it's not about affordable housing. It's about urbanization of California. They don't like suburban communities. They don't want to build more suburban communities. They want to get you out of your car, and they want to urbanize. And the bottom line is, a lot of people like the suburban lifestyle. The governor and the legislature do not. And I don't think this has anything to do with affordable housing. If you look at their policies across the board, again, they have the highest gas tax, the highest car registration fees. And when they spend money, they pretty much don't spend on roads and highways. They spend on things like the bullet train and mass transit. They don't like cars. They want you out of your cars. And this is not about affordable housing. And at the end of the day, more people are leaving the state than coming in. That's why we lost congressional representation. This is not about affordable housing. This is about urbanization of California. And not only when we win for Huntington Beach, we're not going to just win for Huntington Beach, but we're going to win for the suburban communities across the state of California, because that's what this is about. And it's also about local control.
Okay, for both of you, we're going to get back to our interview with the Huntington Beach mayor and the city attorney in just a moment. First, though, we traveled to Huntington Beach, California to find out what some residents there are saying about building in their city.
I oppose it. I think it will change the character of our city. We don't need the added housing, the high-density housing. It's contrary to what the state is trying to tell us, that it creates affordable housing. In fact, it really doesn't. So I'm strongly opposed to it.
Yet, as you know, critics of Huntington Beach, critics of you residents say, well, you're NIMBYs, not in my backyard. No matter what is proposed, you're going to say no.
I disagree with that, but let me just say, I also feel that I am a vested owner in the community, right? I've owned my home. My husband and I moved here specifically for the purpose of raising our family. It's a suburban beach community. I take offense to changing zoning that disrupts my quality of life. If there are places where it makes sense, fine. But when you have a very suburban community, I think I have a right as a property owner to have an opinion about my quality of life.
There is no housing crisis. What there is a government in Sacramento that wants to force housing on every city for whatever their reasons are, because nobody really knows, because they're lying at all times. So what we are objecting to is being forced to build housing based on a lie.
Yet, I hear you. However, the state, the governor say every city, every municipality has to do its part to kind of allow for this affordable housing, to help fight back against homelessness. What's your opinion of that?
So I've never seen an area that put more supposedly affordable housing where housing became more affordable. It's another myth by them. I've never seen it happen.
What is your opinion of the housing that's proposed to be built in your city of Huntington Beach?
There's no place to put it. It's absolutely ridiculous. We don't have the land or the space for that kind of housing. And we've won 2 lawsuits against the state already, and it's a waste of our taxpayers' money that Newsom is trying to do.
The state says that all cities sort of have to provide housing so that homelessness is decreased, so that folks have a better opportunity for housing. Every city has to do their part. Do you see any of their argument as being valid? Because a lot of people say their argument is valid.
No, I do not.
And I don't think that the state should be able to tell a city what to do, especially, without the residents' input.
It's interesting. We have been in your city the entire day today, and we've talked to so many different people, and we can't seem to find someone who is in favor of this housing project. Is that the general consensus of the population here in Huntington Beach? Is there something I'm missing?
I think that's probably the consensus. I mean, I can't say for certain 100%, but I would think that absolutely yes. It's already so crowded down here, and there's so many other things going on. We're just now recovering from COVID. We just have so many other things to worry about that we don't need more residents and more big housing and all that. Let's fix what we've got now first. The cost of housing anywhere near the beach, of course, is astronomical no matter what. And you have to have a certain level of income to be able to enjoy this lifestyle. And the proposed housing, the cost of it still isn't going to be low enough for most people to afford. So I don't think it's actually solving any problem at all. It's certainly not going to solve the homeless problem. They're not going to be the ones living there.
City Attorney Michael Gates, I've reported on many of these kinds of housing development stories over the years in many different cities. To be fair, often you city attorneys, you lawyers, cite the environmental issues. We've talked about this earlier in this interview. These are reasons not to build. Obviously, you're challenging the development. You guys have mentioned the pollution, the traffic, the noise pollution, no parking. You've got the back bay leading out to Huntington Beach and leading out to the ocean. Some are going to question whether these are legit concerns or if this is just not an excuse to build in your city. Are these your usual NIMBY talking points? And then the mayor can talk more about that. Michael.
That's another good question. And I would say no. I mean, this is a legitimate concern. Basically, California environmental laws have set out for decades to protect the California environment really from development, or at least to balance development concerns with environmental concerns and look for ways to mitigate. And what the mayor mentioned earlier about the statement of overriding consideration is directly on point. It's a perfect example of how basically the city council, because of the housing laws, the city council is going to be forced to adopt a statement of overriding consideration. And that is to say that to make an actual affirmative statement that the benefits of high density housing outweigh the negative impacts to the environment created by the proposed zoning change or the 13,368 units. The reason the statement of overriding consideration is even required is that's what the state law requires, the state environmental law, CEQA requires, but B, it literally says that there are negative, substantial, and unavoidable impacts to the environment. So it's not just talking points. The environmental review under CEQA has literally recognized that there are unavoidable, substantial, negative impacts to the environment. And our council is supposed to say, well, the advantages or the benefits of high density development outweigh those negative impacts. And our council has said, not in Huntington Beach, no way. So, that's just kind of where we are. Huntington Beach is a beautiful suburban beach town. We have wetlands here. We have a precious environment here that we're trying to protect. We are 95% already developed. And if the governor wants to advance his housing, he really needs to look in undeveloped areas or even look in Marin County, his hometown, which is largely undeveloped. So, the environment is a real concern here in Huntington Beach. Protecting it's a real concern here in Huntington Beach. And I think these aren't just talking points. We're relying on CEQA, we're relying on our environmental laws, and we're trying to protect Huntington Beach.
Mayor Strickland, we have 1 minute left in this broadcast. Back in the day, and I'll tell you why I'm asking this question in just a moment, Huntington Beach, if I remember, was more of a liberal city, a more progressive city, both the residents and politically speaking, the majority Democrat on the city council. Now you're a conservative mayor. The council, the majority is conservative. How did that happen in Blue California? How'd you flip the city? And I'm asking that because we spoke on the phone just for a few minutes so I can get some background information for this interview. You were basically accusing the governor of targeting you, your council, your conservative ideology. Talk about that.
Well, I mean, it's clear when you look at the fundamental number that they gave Huntington Beach. It's a number that's astronomical. Again, it would increase our population to 50 to 100%. We're one of the few center-right leaning coastal communities left in California, and I think there's a reason why the governor's targeting us. And let's be clear, I'm for development. I'm not anti-development, but I'm for responsible development that fits within our suburban coastal community feel. I am not for urbanization of Huntington Beach, and quite frankly, all four of us that campaigned together, we fought that we would unleash Michael Gates in this lawsuit, and then we said that we would fight back and these high density mandates. And our four council members that just took over the majority campaigned together on that theme, and we won overwhelmingly out of I believe 18 to 20 candidates. All four of us had a historical number of votes. In fact, we had the highest vote total ever in Huntington Beach, and we fought on these issues. We made a contract with Huntington Beach saying we're going to fight for the lifestyle that we love here and enjoy here.
Mayor Strickland, to be fair, there's a housing crisis in California. You have to admit that. There's not enough affordable housing in California. The truth is, in this state, whose ever fault it is, that's for another broadcast, but we've got a high cost of living. The taxes are insane, the gas prices, the regulations. Literally, folks can be a paycheck or a medical crisis away from being homeless. Homelessness is an epidemic. I say it's a pandemic in California, the worst in the nation. The high housing costs in California are adding to the homeless crisis. Maybe the governor is correct. Maybe Huntington Beach can be part of the solution if you build this housing in your city.
Well, two parts to that. First of all, I'm one of those families that sat down with my wife and we penciled it out. And yeah, when I was in Sacramento, I fought for CEQA reform, regulation reform, and a lot of the over policies that we have coming from Sacramento and the mandates coming from Sacramento that increase the cost to develop anything in California. That's number one. Number two, we live in a desirable place. We're right here on the beach. And you tell me a beach community that is inexpensive. Malibu, Santa Barbara, Del Mar, Huntington Beach, Newport Beach, you name it, Manhattan Beach, it's all expensive. And so, my wife and I were sitting down, we're talking about moving to another state because of the, kind of liberal policies coming out of Sacramento. And we pretty much said, okay, with the taxation and what we have right now, we're calling it a weather tax. We love it here in California. We love the weather. But we're going to stay here and fight for fundamental reform to try to make that better. Now, I'll also say in terms of the homeless crisis, we need to do more. And I fought for more in Sacramento in terms of mental health issues and addiction issues. I think most of the homeless crisis comes from mental health and addiction. And quite frankly, if we're going to solve the homeless problem, we've spent $1 gazillion on homelessness, but we're not measuring how we're spending that money. I firmly believe that we should go to nonprofits and church organizations because they know how to solve this problem better than we do. And again, as I said, and the city attorney Michael Gates said, we've done more in Huntington Beach in terms of affordable housing than almost everybody in the region. And if Gavin Newsom actually did his research, he would know that.
Huntington Beach Mayor Tony Strickland and City Attorney Michael Gates, thank you both for a great interview.